Uh, Welcome. Welcome back to The Balanced Mind with myself, Kim Searle, and my co-host, Richard Brewin. You'll see today that we've got somebody extra with us again. We've started to introduce people through because they give a different insight into the world of the balanced mind, which is all about being able to unlock our potential from not the shiniest tool or spreadsheet, but from within, because it's our internal world that drives arguably up to 80% of who we are, if not more. So, welcome to our guest today, David Erickson. Thank you so much for joining us.
You?
Appreciate. So, David, we had a quick chat about what you do. You've done a lot of work around the coaching world, and now you've set yourself up more as a sales coach, helping people through that process and journey. But the thing we've got you in to talk to today about is shattering limiting beliefs. Very close to my heart.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just wonder if you want to just take a few moments to introduce yourself and your thoughts on shattering limiting beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one of my favorite subjects as well, and areas of discussion. Um, I would say that that's what has been guiding my life, and kind of always challenging myself to shatter limiting beliefs. And I see it very closely tied to personal development and growth.
Mm.
We'll always be limited by ourselves, as you said, at least 80%. I would argue more, but yeah.
Yeah, I haven't found where the original research comes from, David, but I've gone with the 80-20 rule because that, everybody
Yes.
understands that and can tap
Sure.
into it.
Yeah. So I would say in my late teens, like closing in on 20, I become really conscious of the limiting beliefs that had been imposed on me or just picked up here and there, whether it was from myself or it was from society. And I made it a point to really challenge it. I guess in the early 20s, that usually takes the shape of rebellion and like pushing a little bit, pushing against a bit too hard, right? But that's probably how it needs to be in many ways as well. So that my life looked like I started my coaching business basically for that purpose. It was like I know I want to do that, and I don't want to go a traditional path. So I quit college. I quit the only job I had to do my own thing on my own terms. So that was very much a statement at the time, and something that have shaped my life since. And then of course that is taking very different shapes now
Mm.
that I turned 30 last week, so it's clearly different. But I would say
Incredible is all I'm going to say. Incredible.
common
I can't
denominator
believe I was
is
at
keep
30.
shattering limiting beliefs. Yeah.
Amazing. So the question has to be, what is a limiting belief? Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say it is, to me, it's gonna be internal for you, but I think kind of tracing it back where it starts is what I mean, that you need to do that, I believe. So society, childhood, and kind of tracing back on all
Mm.
the things that you assume are truths that you don't begin to question. I think that's where you need to go and where the true limiting beliefs are. So even if you pinpoint something that seems obvious, um, it's still a surface level thing, and you rarely solve actual issues.
Yeah.
You never really solve anything on a superficial layer, right? You need to dig deeper. So therefore, I think it needs to go back to the thing you never began to question at all, and looking into that a bit more. So to answer your question, yeah, maybe that's the answer. So the thing you never begin to question is
Yeah, it's where we've accepted what's gone on and we've taken it as true or it's the
yeah,
rule.
without the process behind it, right? Without actually going
Yeah.
through of why you arrived at this is a truth,
Mm.
right? And there's some objective truths, I'd argue, but most of the truths we think are truths are not really like objective truths. They're just something we've been told or told ourselves, and not analyzed. And we never reached a conclusion. We just took it and ran with it.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one, isn't it, Richard, within the accountancy and bookkeeping world is they are they go through some really strong training, don't they, to tell them what the rules are, to the point that oh, I don't know that this is true, by the way, bit contentious maybe, that they don't necessarily think beyond those rules. These are the rules and these are the ones I've got to do. What's your thoughts there about how that might affect how they believe in themselves and what they're doing?
This is something that fascinates me, and I think it's fundamental to um, the sort of the internal challenges that accountants face.
Mm,
Because we talk about limiting beliefs, and within the accounting profession, lack of confidence, fear of change, imposter syndrome. These things are all endemic within the profession, and there's an interesting discussion around whether it's so endemic because that's the sort of person who is attracted into accountancy, or it's so endemic because that is the route that we get taken down once we come into accountancy. I mean, I'm an accountant. I've been an accountant for certainly more than David's 30 years. um, and I wouldn't say that I'm that sort of person. So I push back against that. I look a lot more at the training route. We are trained to be cautious. We're trained to be risk averse. We're not trained commercially. We're not trained how to run businesses. We're trained how to audit other businesses. So I tend to point a finger very heavily at the sort of the professional walls that are built around us and the route that we go down. I've met thousands of accountants over the years, and I've met thousands of different personalities. I don't believe there is this one type of person who becomes an accountant just because they're
yeah.
good at numbers at school. But I think there is that view out there. But I think the spread of accountants is no different to any other population group. But I do think there's something around the environment in which we all then develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess from my experiences with working with them, invariably confidence is a large part of it. The ability to, trust and believe in what they know and use that um, beyond their training. Because there's an element I find in a number of conversations is that training is what gives them the comfort, confidence, the ability to do what they do. But like you say, Richard, they're not necessarily trained into other areas. And that's where the beliefs, the limiting beliefs can start to show up because, a lot of talk is being given to business advisory, David. This idea that they can talk about business, but their whole belief system is getting in the way of this. What sort of thing do you think they can do for themselves to help them overcome these challenges? Because they're all valid. And let me tell you, they're not just accountants and bookkeepers. It's anybody who's gone down a professional route. They have become very left brain centric, shall we say. And I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. Just a bit of a ha ha this morning.
So I'm fascinated about what you said there, Richard, with like there's basically a general belief on an accountant is a certain way. And that obviously feeds the limiting belief of each individual accountant. There's somewhere in there it's like, oh, this is how I ought to behave so that people perceive me correctly and I don't deviate from that. Um, which is a shame, right? Because there's obviously more potential there, and each individual um suppresses themselves essentially and their unique expression and their unique value by that. So to change and to shatter the limiting belief, like unfortunately you need to do that individually, and it will be an uphill battle because the overall perception of what it is to be an accountant or insert whatever label will stay, and you can't change the world just like that, right? So it's unfortunately an uphill battle. My belief is each individual need to go through that process, and we need to facilitate that process. And then over a longer time frame, the overall conception of an accountant, for example, can begin changing. Right.
I think, I mean, we talk a lot about the hamster wheel that accountants are on when it comes to their workload and their production and all the rest of it. But actually, I think there's a more fundamental wheel that they're on, which does link to this mindset that, when we come into the profession, we are almost presented with limiting factors, things that we can't do. That then, because there are things that we can't do, I think that builds up our frustration because we're not achieving what we personally wanted to achieve. We lose our energy, we lose our drive, we start to lose our confidence. That then it almost becomes a self-fulfilling outcome that we're not supposed to do these things. So all of a sudden we start to think that we can't do these things. And I think we have to, in the same way that to break the production cycle, you've got to be brave enough to step off the wheel and look at it differently. I think it's the same with this. We've got to, there has to be a point where we go, I'm not having this.
Yep.
Now I don't necessarily know what I am having, but I need to recognise that I need to talk to somebody else. I need to get a different perspective on this. Am I really the person who I think I am? What happened to that person who had those dreams, those ambitions, those goals? I think you have to sort of almost take a physical step, don't you, of looking at yourself, and it's very hard to look at yourself without somebody else helping you on that in that conversation.
Absolutely. It's kind of analogy like you need to empty the cup before you can fill it up with something else. If your cup is full, it's like you can't by definition fill it with something else. There's nothing to contain it. You need to empty it, kind of clean slate it, and then you can rebuild from there. And that's a scary process, right? That's deep identity stuff and who you thought you were that needs to be at least temporarily put on hold and challenged. Like maybe I'm not at all who I think I am. Probably you got some things right, but you kind of need to go through that process. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I know with what I know about limiting beliefs, I love what you said earlier about the fact that they are created by those around us at a time when perhaps we weren't in the know. And that doesn't always just have to be childhood. That can be things that come up as we go on our journey through adult life. So they can always crop up. How do you think that people can start to identify whether they've got a limiting belief at play?
I was just thinking about that, and I can use a personal example, but I think we often we make things too black and white in an attempt to simplify the world. So if I commit to my career, I can't build a family or whatever kind of the illusion that we have to choose. Where I think a lot of the time we really don't, right? There is a way to do both, and I think a lot of limiting beliefs are hidden in that type of black and white thinking. It's like, oh, I need to choose this over this, and probably not. Like there's probably a way to do it, maybe not exactly the way you think right now, but that's kind of irrelevant because you don't exist now. You exist now and every single moment into the future with new touch points because of your added experiences along the way. That's definitely one for me where I thought like business will take a substantial hit and I won't be able to work as much if I'm also committing to my family. And I have a contradiction in what I should choose, right? It's probably a good idea to have your hierarchies, your values straight and what you will choose if you have to choose, right? But at the same time, not thinking that they're mutually exclusive and can't coexist, right?
Yes. So again, thinking about it from an accountant's perspective, I think, and again, Richard, I need your guidance on this. They've learnt to be the accountant, bookkeeper, whatever they're doing. And I don't know that this holds true for the younger generation, but certainly for the older ones who may be more in the traditional area or had been in the traditional area, that they are almost thinking in one way, in one modality. And we need to somehow get them to understand that they can break out and see the world differently, such that that would probably bring up some of those beliefs, wouldn't it? It's how do you do that? How do you make them or help them, I should say, to realize there's something different that can happen?
I think that point that you made, David, is a very good one. The idea that people see these things in black and white, and I think maybe that is one of the problems in the profession, that we are taught. We're taught that things are black and white. They're either right or they're wrong. They're accurate or they're inaccurate. There's not an awful lot that we do that is in between, and so we tend to start to see our own businesses, our own teams, our own performances in the same way. We expect, we believe that we're the people who are supposed to have all the answers, which of course is nonsense, because unless you're a very wise old man sitting on top of a mountain, you ain't that person. But that's one of the things, when we can't find an answer, we start to then, first of all, hide away from the issue, but also we question ourselves. And I think that drives, if we just take the view that, why don't we recognize there's a problem? And then, because I think that's the starting point. The starting point is, I'm going to fix this because we can't. I'm rubbish at fixing. But if we recognize there's a problem, so therefore, okay, I might do a bit of research, or in my case, I'll go and talk to somebody. But let's start to explore the problem rather than immediately trying to find a fix, because the world doesn't work that way, does it? If you look at the great inventors or scientists and that, they don't immediately dive into a fix. They identify a problem, and that's where their journey starts. As accountants, we have this. Maybe it's because we're in a world of deadlines. We're driven by deadlines. We're driven by projects. So we always want to get to the end, and the quicker we get to the end, the better. And I think that's what harms us. Sometimes it's like, let's just explore the journey. Let's recognize that we need to go on a journey. Let's explore that. Let's embrace that. Let's just not try to be so judgmental. Let's not judge everything as right or wrong. Let's judge everything as done or not done.
Fully agree. And made me think of, I think there's a lot of ownership. I mean, there to confront your limiting beliefs, you need to take extreme ownership for yourself. And so using my example before, with like, you can't build a family and a business at once, right? Well, what if the truth is I'm just not good enough yet to do that? So identifying the problem, what is actually the problem? Well, I don't have a sufficient skill set to multitask, or whatever it is. I need to diagnose what is actually a deficit in my skill set, in myself, and then empower in an empowering way. How can I pursue that? How can I learn those things so I can do it, right? So that's actually growth mindset, but it starts with like pointing the mirror at you. I'm not good enough yet, right? Problem. And staying there and sitting that with it, rather than, as you say, jumping to the fix, which could be, it's not possible to do that. You can't balance those are in contradiction. So I'm just going to pick the business and not think about the family, right? And there's plenty of examples of that, and vice versa. So absolutely.
So I had several things going through my head then. Which one will I go with? So when you see clients then, David, do you go in with, the chances are there's some limiting beliefs going on there. And how do you help them identify what they are?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, I always act on the belief, I guess, that there is a limiting belief in there somewhere that is limiting something
Yeah.
tangible. I think as a coach, it's important to timing is essential, right? When do you bring that forward? Because
Mhm.
you very rarely can just go, first meeting and just like, hey, this is your limiting belief. You need to work on that. That's not a coaching skill. That's a poor coach, essentially. They need to arrive at that, and they need to see it for themselves in whatever way makes sense for them, and you need to facilitate them to that point, right?
Mhm.
So I would try to have my best guess on it, but I would also have room for error in my own perception, because they are the one to reach their limiting beliefs themselves, and I have to facilitate, which probably mean hopefully I'm a few steps ahead, right? But it's more about facilitating them getting there. So
Mm.
now that I'm focusing more on sales, like there is a ton of limiting beliefs there. But
I
what's
can imagine.
interesting, it's always self-limiting beliefs, I would argue, in what holds back their own personal sales skills, or if you're related to a company revenue, right? There's always some limitation that isn't actually a limitation. Um, so for me, it can't be attacked directly, because they think it is something, a tool, right, or a trick, something simple that needs to be changed or incorporated, and it's a new platform or whatever it is. And I usually quickly see like, oh, that's the fix. That's jumping to the, like, hoping that it is simple, black and white thinking. And the truth is way more nuanced, and probably something that is not within their current level of awareness. And I need to make them see that. And once they see that, we can start working on it. Yeah. Did I answer your question there?
Yes, I think you did.
I think the challenge is that, when it comes to limiting beliefs, we almost, I think, we know personally what our limiting beliefs are. It's just that we see them as almost real, tangible, factual problems. I'm not very good. I can't sell. I'm not a good boss. Whatever it may be, we see that as reality, and therefore to have that, there's a fear in having that conversation with somebody else because you think because you're going to have to face up to the fact that you're not very good.
Yes.
You don't actually understand that that other person might be able to demonstrate to you that you're wrong, that actually you are good, because that it's embedded that tell me, you're just going to make me feel even worse. You're just going to tell me that I've got to work harder. You're going to tell me that I've got to go out and have sales meetings when I don't like having sales meetings. There is that fear of that next step. And I think having sat on both sides of the fence, having been an accountant in practice, running my own firm, having then been a coach and working with others, you see it on both sides, don't you? And I think what changed things for me was when I found myself in a position where I could openly talk to other accountants. Because then you go, oh, it's not just me then. I thought it was just me. I thought I was the worst in the room. And it turns out you all think you're the worst in the room, And so I quite like, I think, sort of peer type conversations are really good, but I think you need to bring some control to them. But I think you've got to be prepared. If there's anything coming out of this conversation, it's look, that first step may feel scary. You know how you feel, and you feel that it's real. And do you know what? Some of it might be. You might be rubbish at sailing, but we can fix that. But that first step isn't a step off a cliff. It's actually the first step towards realizing that maybe that your perception of the world just is a bit wrong. You come from, I say to so many accountants, you're nowhere near as bad as you think you are. You should see some of the people I talk to. And they all go, really? There's someone worse than me? I'm going, hey, And I grew up as someone, my wife is my business partner as well as my wife. So I've never been the best accountant in my own house, let alone in the industry, anything like that. You quickly get over those things. But once you get over that statement, isn't it? Once you get over it, all of a sudden everything lightens up, doesn't it? It's that first step which is the hardest.
Mm.
I agree. I think a keyword that came to me from what you just said is vulnerability. I think it needs to that's a prerequisite for shattering limiting belief. And I would also argue that it's a prerequisite to actual confidence, not just fabricated confidence. So if you can own the fact that maybe you're not the best yet, and maybe you're flawed, and maybe what you think is just wrong, straight up, right? If you can own that and still stand there, confident, that's real. And I think that's a prerequisite to shatter limiting beliefs.
Yeah, and I think limiting beliefs, I don't know where it's come from as a phrase, but it's still relatively new out there. I mean, we were talking about it when I was learning to be a coach back in 2003 and 4. It's the first time I'd ever come across it, really. But I suspect it'd been around for a bit longer, but it's still quite relatively new in the scheme of things. And so people don't always understand either that they've got any or the impact it's having on their life. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
the sorts of things that can happen. I mean, I talk very much about, the habits that they're seeing, like you say, Richard, the tangible things, the procrastination, the perfectionism, the imposter syndrome, the confidence levels, having difficult conversation, la la la. And all of those are really just surface level. So I love the idea that you're talking about digging deep to understand what's behind that and to, shine a light on it almost, isn't it? And this is where I want to just bring it back and just see your opinion, David. So I had a bit of a moment this morning. I was talking to my daughter about something, and I was talking about the whole left brain thing, how I work with people who are very left brain. It's been very developed. It's logic. That's come round because of an a little bit tough, but from the whole science kick off in the Middle Ages, because that was the way. If you can prove it, you can't be argued with. Feels like a safety mechanism to my mind, but hey, another conversation. So we're very left-brained in the professional world because that's the way we've had to learn how we work with life, etc. What it's doing is shutting out almost 50% of our brain, which is the creative side, the right side, the side that will process information and, let us know how we're doing. So my question to you then is, how easy is it to make that transition from a logical, analytical step to something that's a little intangible and can't hold, can you? Or box up?
Yeah. So I think that there's a bit of a paradox in that, because it would be easy to think that it is difficult, and that would be a limiting belief in itself, right? It would be a convenient excuse about, oh, that's going to be difficult, I'm going to have to work on that, that's going to be hard. But what if not? What if it's easy? What if you have everything you need already? If you literally have that other side of your brain right here, and you can just get out of your way. So of course there's some reprogramming, and there's a journey to it, right? As a lens though, to like look through, I don't think it serves you to think it's going to be extremely difficult. I think it serves you to be like, oh, I have it already, I just need to express it.
And I very often talk about what can be learned, which is what the belief is, that you're not working for, can be unlearned. So I very often liken it to a laptop, in the idea that you've got a program that's not working properly. You can uninstall it and then reinstall it so it's fresh again. So you're doing something very similar to that. How long would you say it takes to shatter this limiting belief? Because you said at the beginning it can take some time.
Yes, right. So I think there's different kinds, not to make it too deep, but there's sudden enlightenment, right? If you look at Eastern religions, and there's kind of gradual. You need to 80 years to reach the top of the mountain and achieve guru status, right? And I think both are true. I think there's some things, if you look back in your life, where it literally just clicked, like just literally a second transformation, and you just looked at something different and everything was different, right? I think we can all find those moments, and there were probably a lot of things leading up to that we can't really trace back. They're too chaotic and too scattered for our brains to make sense of. We just remember that moment when it kind of clicked, right? So whether you want to call it sudden enlightenment, right? So I think some limiting beliefs can just be a snap of the finger, and it's hard to trace back if there was any work before, or right. Sometimes that's reading a quote. That has happened to me. I read a quote and it's just so impactful, like literally life-changing. Same quote a week earlier, though, probably wouldn't have any impact. So it's this weird dynamic of perfect timing and the stars aligning or whatever, and then it just clicks, right? So I guess my answer is a bit of both. I think it's a journey, but there's probably also a kind of pivotal moment where it all clicks together and the belief is shattered, so to say.
Yeah. And sorry, Richard, I don't know whether you've got something to say there. Just quickly,
Well,
it's the whole idea of a journey. That's
yeah. I was going to come back to that, and I think I liked the analogy you used earlier, David, about emptying the glass. I can see myself doing a course in the future where I'm standing in front of a room of them and I'm filling the glass right to the limit so that you can't touch it without something going wrong. And then going, look, that's where you are, and you all get that feeling that that how insecure that is, how risky that looks, and then just picking it up and throwing the water away and go, right, let's start again. And because I do think it is a journey, I think in a sense you've got to go back, you've got to strip it right back to, let's just remind ourselves why you're doing this. Let's just remind ourselves what's really important to you, and start to rebuild that person. It isn't. We almost have this fear of psychology, don't we? That we're going to be made to lie on a couch and tell everyone what's wrong with childhood and all the rest of it, and sort of collapse in a bundle of tears. But actually, it's just no. Let's just go back to basics. Let's go back to where you started this journey before. Or if we were starting to fill this glass again today, what would you start filling it with? What would you do different? Almost sort of strip it back, because I think your point there is bang on, David, that it's a journey, but there are these points where they go, oh yeah, I get that. I understand that. Yeah, I see that differently now. And you sort of build those layers, don't you? And it reaches a point where actually you can then step to one side, because then they're racing ahead themselves again. But it's that first moment. Are you prepared to throw the glass out the water? No, the water out of the glass. You can do the glass out the water if you like, but let's go for the water out of the glass.
Let's start with a different glass. That works.
There'll be someone who just throws the glass against the wall, and you go, right.
Also
now what do we do?
Now, shattered the belief. We've
I did.
shattered the limiting belief, and now you're just bringing a new one. How
More,
fabulous is
more
that?
entertaining course, I would say. Shatter the
Yes, if
glass.
only we could do more of those.
Well, just one thing before I forget on that, Richard, I feel that it's kind of an unforgiving nature of for a coach as well, because we are the facilitators of that journey, and then that moment happens, and that's the focus, and it should be the focus, right? But it's easy to miss all the things that led up to it because those kind of are intangibles and a little here and a little there. But like a coach can redirect a path from like how do I put this? I wish I could paint on screen like a 5% degree initially becomes massively misaligned over time, right?
Yeah.
And if that your coach can just keep you on target, like that is literally the reason why you hit the target, why that pivotal moment happened. Like you can't, if that wasn't the case, it would not have happened. It would be completely misaligned, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to trace that back. It's hard to understand the value of coaching because it's all of nuanced tangibles, and you can kind of like, oh, I reached that myself. It's sudden enlightenment. I came to the conclusion, and you can take the credit yourself, which is also fine, right? But I think that's the kind of unfortunate nature of coaching in some senses.
It is, and I think it's as important that we continue to look backwards as well as forwards, and particularly this time of year. Christmas is at the time of recording. Christmas is coming up. Yeah, so all the accounting teams, they're focused on tax returns, but they're focused on what they're going to do next year and the challenges and all the rest of it. And one of the things I'm always saying at this time of year is talk to your team about what you've achieved in the last 12 months.
Mhm.
Compare where you are now with where you were 12 months ago, because you've still got these hurdles to cross, you've still got these challenges to come, but just look at all the things that you've done, because the problem about being on a journey is that you can just constantly be looking forward, and sometimes you don't realize, do you know what, we've come a long way. I'm into my running, and one of the things that I learned very early on when it comes, particularly when you're doing sort of half marathon distance, that sort of thing, is don't focus on how many miles you've still got to do. Just remember how many miles you've already done. You've got those in the bank, and it's getting people to keep that balance, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to add one thing to that, and I think further than that, like look at the subtle little things that happened before the win happened, right? So okay, you look back the last year and you see all of this kind of victories, right? What happened before? Like what was the reason for the win? Because that's probably the thing you can reverse engineer and repeat, right? And I think that's a good lens for the inner game, right? Like there was something internal that shifted, that clicked, that you didn't spot, and then it materialized and became explicit, right? Um, I'll try to be brief on this, but I think it's a good analogy. I was a handstand coach early on, so I was teaching hand balancing, which is extremely niche, obviously. And why would you care to learn a handstand? Well, actually, it's an amazing self-development tool. It teaches you a lot about yourself. Of course, there's physical benefits and proprioception and balance and body control in general. Um, but it's an awesome tool for the inner game. It's also extremely difficult, which helps patients, etc. Why I'm mentioning that is because I looked at a ton of footage of people trying to balance on their hands and failing miserably, right? And I had to be patient with them and give them small little tweaks. And it's so subtle, right? It's a handstand, right? It's not walking, it's just standing. All you have to balance with is your fingers. Like this is what you got, right? So it's a game of aligning everything else as statically as possible so that this little micro movements is enough to correct, right? So it's a rebalancing act rather than like, you're not static, you're a human, right? So you need to keep doing this. What I learned to notice was about 2 to 3 weeks before they actually did it, and they had their first freestanding, free balancing handstand, let's say for 10, 20 seconds, like a substantial time. I saw their fingers start to move on the floor. Very subtle. No one else would have picked it up that didn't have that coaching experience, right? That's something I'm trying to do now in the current field, right? Like what are the subtle things that only an expert eye will spot before, a little bit before the transformation happens, the sale progress happens, the client is signed, whatever it is, right? That's fascinating to me. So relating that to what you said, Richard, I think review back 100%, and to make that even more powerful, try to notice those small little internal shifts that happened. And over time, you can see those trends and you can lean into that, maximize for that.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's
Thank
a
you.
great perspective. And you know, there you have it, listeners. If you come along to one of my courses, you can watch me fill a glass of water. If you come to David's, you can get taught how to do grandstands.
I mean,
Oh, amazing.
combine it, Richard. I'll do the handstands. You'll throw the glasses.
We'll do that. Well, we will do that.
Perfect. So we just need to, we're coming to the end of our time here today. There's so much more I'm sure we could cover. We've skimmed the surface, I feel. Is there any pearls of wisdom that you could give over to anybody listening today who is wondering whether they need to do something? What would you say?
Just in general, like limiting belief style. Yeah, I would leave with this. I think people underestimate. It's easy to see the risk of doing something, and it's very hard to see the risk of not doing something. Like quitting the job, it's very obvious risks, right? Getting married, getting divorced, right? But if you really think about the opposite of not doing that thing, and you look at it long enough time horizon, I think a lot of the time that's riskier, right? It's riskier to not quit the job because in 10 years you'll be doing the same thing and you will have pursued none of your dreams and you're 10 years older, etc. Or relating it back to my example before of not like the risk of not pursuing my business all in and my family all in and confronting the limiting belief that those are at odds with each other. The risk of not doing that means I will be 10 years older and not have a family, or I will have 10 years of struggle financially with my family, right? I don't want either. So look at the risk of not doing something. If you're scared about doing it, flip it, look at the risks of not doing it. And I think a lot of shattering limiting belief will be presented by that practice.
Sounds good advice. Don't you agree, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, whatever your perceived limiting factor is, I can absolutely guarantee that you're better than you think you are. I mean, if you're a person who thinks that you are better than you are, then you won't be listening to this podcast anyway. So we're all in that other camp. So I can guarantee that you are better than you think you are. You've just got to be prepared to make that first step. You know, I'm willing to have that conversation. That's all it needs to sort of unlock that real potential that lurks inside you.
Perfect. Thank you. David, if anybody listening to this podcast wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
I would say LinkedIn is the best way for that. So send me a connection note. Maybe you can mention this podcast. So like I know where you're coming from. But we have David Erickson on LinkedIn. That would be the best way.
Perfect. I will put it into the comments for the podcast, but it's worth just saying it here as well.
Just to plug David as well, I can say from my own experience, David's an inspiring guy to talk to. You know, get over the fact that he's young. You know, he'll get older in time, like the rest of us.
Biggest problem, Richard. Like,
but he's someone who, yeah, he's got a fascinating life story. He practices what he preaches, and it's just always a very entertaining conversation to have with David. So I'd thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Likewise.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Appreciate that. And we'll be chatting again soon, won't we, Richard? And watch out for the next podcast. This one obviously is one of the first ones in 2025. We've got quite a list lined up. So please do like and subscribe. It means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.